Welcome to the Dose of Optimism, where I talk to the optimists in healthcare. My name is Omkar Kulkarni, and I work at one of the world's best children's hospitals, where I lead innovation. I started KidsX, which is a premier international startup accelerator for pediatric innovation. And over the years, I've met thousands of startups, investors, and innovators. Every one of them has a story, and every one of them is optimistic about the problems they're solving. On this podcast, you'll meet amazing people who will share their stories and what makes them optimistic about the future of healthcare. A little note before you get into this episode. This podcast is for informational purposes only. We are not offering medical advice, and we're not endorsing any products. Please talk to your own physician about your health or the health of your children. All right, let's get started. Happy New Year! A Dose of Optimism kicks off 2026 featuring two incredible parentrepreneurs. First, Hafeezah Muhammad. Her son, he was 6 at the time, told her something that shook her world. She was inspired and built Backpack Health to help other young children and parents going through similar challenges. What got you into Backpack, and what was your inspiration to get the company started?
I started Backpack from a very personal place. In October of 2020, my son, who was 6, came to me and told me that he wanted to kill himself. My heart broke. I didn't see it come in. I struggled to find care for him. And because of a disability, he was on Medicaid, and it was really hard to find care, one that I could afford that accepted his insurance. But also as a mom, I felt embarrassed, and I was looking for tools to help support me through the journey, and that wasn't available, and that's when I left and I started what at the time was Yumi Healthcare, which we rebranded now to Backpack Healthcare.
Hafiza, whenever I hear you tell the story, it awakens me a little bit. What your son told you at age 6. A lot of parents don't think about somebody that young having thoughts like that, but I imagine it's probably more common than we think. Kids can have these thoughts around self harm or even just mental health challenges at earlier ages than perhaps we think.
That is correct. One thing I wanted to share is that what most people don't know is that 60% of all mental illnesses start by age 14. So if you think about the challenges, it's not starting at age 14, it's starting before age 14. And that's a significant amount of what is undiagnosed, untreated in childhood that you see where it's head more in adulthood, but it's because someone has been suffering for more than a decade. And there are a lot of early signs that parents and families tend to miss that their child might be struggling. And we just want to ensure that you are able to be aware that it is possible, because I could tell you that I was the first person to tell you that I didn't believe mental health challenges existed for a long time until really when I had my first baby and I had postpartum depression and then my son. And that was the first time I actually believed that it was even real.
So, what are some of the early signs of potential mental health issues?
I can share from my personal experience is that I think about where one of my daughters is struggling, but some of the behaviors of like always asking the same questions over and over, looking for support, looking for constant, I don't know how to say it, just make sure I'm like politically correct, but just like the need, sometimes the need for attention that's might not be normal, things of like isolations, emotional crying. There are like so many different variations because every child is different. But just being aware and seeing that if something doesn't feel normal to you as a mom, you're feeling overwhelmed in some capacity, that there might be something underlying that's a concern, but it's all about your feeling as a parent of you're like, this doesn't seem like it's normal. And if you're feeling that it's not normal, then it probably isn't.
Walk us through the technology and the tool that you have.
Yeah, so what we have is that a combination is that we have therapists. We're a clinical services company at its core. We provide therapy, psychiatry, psychological evaluations, and now also peer support. So we have our clinicians that's leading the way. In addition to that, we in between session support, we have some guided tools like a self-care app that can help the parents as well as the kids do homework around anxiety. What is anxiety? What does it look like to them? Daily check-ins to see how they're doing, some wellness tools, and also we have a care companion that's available in 250 languages. So an example of that, like when I was struggling, I could have been asking, hey, my child is 5 years old. These are the behaviors I'm seeing. Is this age appropriate behavior? And this was built with my therapist that we have who's built it to ensure that it was accurate and ensuring that we're able to provide better holistic support in between sessions to ensure that we can help our patients improve and parents don't ever feel alone.
That's amazing. What is the age range that you have? What's the youngest patient or participant in your program?
We do as young as 4 years old is where someone can start. And we do also the whole family. So we also see as far as grandparents, parents. So we want to ensure that we take care of the whole family as well.
Why is it important to have the grandparent or parents involved in this therapy?
So when kids are born, we all know there is no handbook that comes with treating kids. And usually parents have not gotten treatment to help support them. And they're going to spend more time with their parents during the week than they are even with a therapist. So being able to help support their parents with any mental health challenges or journeys that they might be facing so that they be able to learn the skills to help support their child is something that's really important because when a child is suffering, the whole family is suffering and everyone needs to be working together so that we can also help them so that they can also help their kids so that we can strengthen the family unit in regards to having the family be a part of the conversation and be a part of the support.
I imagine that can improve the outcome that the child would actually have.
It will improve the outcome because if everyone is leading from a place of empathy, is that, wow, I've seen myself as a mom and I had to think about my parenting style, right? What could I do different for this specific child? And then also, my daughter is very different than my son. So it's like, and then I have a 3 year old. So I have three kids with three different personalities, with three different approaches that I need to take. And that one approach that I learned as I was growing up as a kid is not the right approach because every child is their individual. So I was learning skills necessary to pivot for each child. And that allows the parents to learn the skills necessary to be able to treat what's happening, who they are as a parent, but also to translate that and how best to help support their child.
I've had on this show a few other parents like you who've seen problems that they've experienced as parents with their kids, and that's been the inspiration to create solutions for their family. How do you, as the head of a company building product, balance both what you are seeing for your kids versus the needs of other families that may be a little different?
What we've done is that we build a lot of things around the treatment of various disorders, this diagnosis, right? So my child diagnosis is probably going to be very different than any other kids out there. And just building a treatment where it's personalized for each individual, making sure we have the right therapist to help support, but also including parents in the conversations, as well as the kids in the way that we design our products, our tools to best help support them because I wanted to ensure that every parent, no matter who they are, they had a way to have access to support. And by doing that, it allowed me to open up my box and saying there's more out there than just anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. And how do we help best support maybe like adjustment disorders or various things that come up and just have good paths so that everyone, no matter what their diagnosis are, that we can support them. We treat almost every diagnosis. There's not a diagnosis that we turn a patient away from. We treat everyone that comes through a door.
And how do patients find you?
A lot of the times they find us, we have what's called referring organizations. So we work a lot in the community with pediatrician offices. We work with healthcare plans with their care coordination team so that they're able to transfer patients into backpack. And then we also have a direct to consumer approach where we market directly to consumers. But majority of our patients have come from referring organizations within the community. So we're very community based.
A lot of kids are on Medicaid and some of them are insured by private health insurance companies. Is there a world where you think that those types of payers could pay for backpack?
So it's actually exciting that most people didn't know this. When we started Backpack, I look at my family dynamic where I had one child in Medicaid and the other kids commercial insurance, and that's really common for some families. And we wanted from day one to make sure it's one of the most affordable places that anyone can access care. So currently we have around 50-50 split. So half of our patients are in Medicaid, half of our patients are commercial. So pretty much in the states that we're in, whatever insurance you have, we usually take it so that you have the cost effective access to care. So Medicaid is free. If it's commercial, it's usually like your copay or deductible, whatever your insurance covers is what you pay. So it's like the most affordable access to care.
It's not easy to get Medicaid coverage and or insurance coverage.
It's definitely the hardest thing that we've ever been through, especially on the Medicaid side. One thing I would share is that in Medicaid is it's all state by state. So if you think about there's like country, it's like a different country when you go to a state because whatever rules apply in that state does not apply to the others. So there's a lot of legwork. Sometimes it can take up to a year just to even get your Medicaid ID. So some of the rigor, and then you have to apply to go to the insurance companies to be able to accept insurance. So there's a lot of pre-planning that takes place up front. The good news is that we pretty much learned how to navigate the complexity of the applications by state and be able to have a head start on different states' applications. So what I would tell every individual is that go to the state's website. There should be like an application process. Usually they look for outcomes. So you would have to have been providing care for some time so that you can have outcomes and showcase how well you're treating patients to even be enrolled in some capacity. So really just going to each state website and looking through the forms. They're very challenging, but it's a good place to start.
That's amazing. Speaking of outcomes, what types of outcomes do you personally look for as success measures for your product?
Some of the things that we look at is reduction in anxiety and depression scores. So we look at whatever the score came in as for anxiety, depression, we look for an improvement. So right now we're about a 71% reduction in symptoms for anxiety and 78% reduction in symptoms for depression. And then you have clinical significant reduction in symptoms. And those are the things that we look for. One other thing we look at closely that most people wouldn't think of is time to care. We try to keep it below 5 days that it takes an average of our patients less than 5 days from when they contact us to when they actually see someone. Right now, we're averaging over 3. And we've had times where we've gotten up to like 12 days, which is for us is like, whoa, that's really a long time. But in a grand scheme of things, is a lot shorter than what you will see in typical where people wait months to even get into care. But we average around 5 days.
Have you been following what's going on in Illinois? It seems like they just passed a law that in the near future there'll be universal screening for mental health in schools. What are your thoughts about that?
When I look at mental health, I think about it like this different stages of cancer. If you're able to capture in stage 1, my mom had an endometrial cancer at stage 4. She's doing well now, but if we were able to capture it at stage 1, then it would have been a lot easier for her. She would have not needed radiation and chemo for such a long time. Maybe surgery could have resolved it. And I think about mental health in the same way. The earlier you're able to catch it, you get it before it comes into a crisis where you're not able to manage it. So early intervention is so critical because you're able to set a path, be able to know the why of why something is happening, and you have the option to be able to get treatment before it's too late.
Hafeezah, thank you for joining us.
And now for your dose of dad jokes. Why did the doctor always carry a red pen? In case he needed to draw blood. What do you call a pony with a little cough?
What?
A little horse. How did the doctor cure the invisible man? He took him to the ICU.
That's good. I like that one. Next, I speak with Carla Small. Carla was leading innovation at Boston Children's and was inspired by what was happening with her son to build Sprout Labs to help families and children with dyslexia.
Like you, Omkar, I was focused on leading innovation on the other coast, Boston Children's Hospital. And there was a project that was one of 30 in the portfolio that was really exciting. It was a scientifically validated predictive dyslexia screener. And it was really promising technology and based on really solid research done by a neuroscientist at Boston Children's Hospital. So when it came time to spin that venture out, I actually left and co-founded the company with that neuroscientist. And that screener is used in schools across the country now. And we sold that business last fall to a big ed tech publisher. But in terms of Sprout Labs, what I was thinking about as I was listening to some of your podcasts, you had that entrepreneur.
Parentrepreneur, but yeah, the concept of parents who are motivated by what they see in pediatrics to build something or help lead something innovative.
Totally. And that is actually my story. So, my youngest has dyslexia. He was diagnosed at 8, actually at Boston Children's Hospital, but I knew when he was 3. So, there was this sort of 5-year journey, which is very typical of parents, where you're wondering, is something going on? What is it? Should I do something about it? Should I worry about it? What do I do? And then who's good at helping me? You're in this sort of spiral of trying to figure out what to do. And that's basically what Sprout Labs is. It's everything that a family needs, the one-stop shop for kids who are struggling with learning. And specifically, we're starting with reading with dyslexia.
Carla, you said you knew at 3. I've got a 3-year-old too. So how did you know?
He was learning differently than his 2 older siblings. His story is also pretty classic and a bit about how these things tie to the social and emotional well-being of these kids. So, super bright kid. He could debate philosophy with his older brother at 4, but he could not recite the alphabet. He didn't know his letters, had trouble tying his shoes. It's funny, not necessarily scientifically validated, but if you talk to parents of kids with dyslexia, it's a bit about the following directions issue and the working memory issue. And so he went off to kindergarten and again in first grade. And while his friends were learning the alphabet and letter sounds, letter names, and then how to read, he wasn't grasping it. And that was the really hard part because you just watch their self-esteem decline. And he went from this vivacious learning kid to calling himself stupid. And that's when it just breaks your heart, really.
Thanks for sharing it. I'm glad he's getting the help he needs. So, what is it? Tell me what Sprout Labs is and how it works for kids that are elementary school age.
That's for kids age 4 to 12, and so pre-K through 6th grade. And basically what we are doing is, as I said, providing everything that I wish I had at the time. So the first thing is a diagnostic or an assessment that tells you what are their strengths and weaknesses, what's going on with their brain and their skill set. And then the second thing is solid evidence-based instruction. So based on the methodology that's the gold standard, it's called Orton-Gillingham, and other cutting-edge sort of methodology around teaching kids who struggle with reading. There's good instruction. And then another piece that was really important to me to include is navigational support for the parents. Because we're often wondering, like, how do I talk to my child about this? How do I talk to the school about it? Should I be buying adaptive equipment? Is it time for private school? So that sort of navigational support is built into what we're doing as well.
And so, walk me through how it works. So, the child who may be a candidate for help reads something. Is there an assessment that's done through
It's an assessment.
technology? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's an assessment that's done, and it's pretty thorough assessment. It's game-based, and they play a game, and we get feedback that says these are their strengths and weaknesses on the foundational skills. That's really important because it paints a picture on the detailed areas that we know that they need to work on. Very typical for a kid, much like my Matthew, strong in vocabulary, strong in oral comprehension, but weak in the phonemic level. Like they have trouble blending sounds, understanding letter sounds, letter names. So that helps us shape the instruction and make it really customized and personalized to exactly what they need. So it's much more efficient.
And once you have that assessment, then you're able to provide these tools that help parents and the children. How long is the program that they're in?
Yeah, it's a monthly subscription. And, every kid is different based on what their profile is and the severity of their issue. And for instruction, we have a tablet-based game that we've used for younger kids. And we're now in the process of building out the AI version for older kids.
Well, how do you define older kid and what is the AI-based program?
There's so much conversation about anxiety around AI, and I would say this is AI for good, and this is a perfect application for AI. What's happening in our country today, there's $30 billion a year spent on tutoring. 2% of it is high quality, high dose tutoring. So the reality is, what happens when your child is in third grade, let's say, and that's a very typical time when parents actually identify and know that their kid has a reading issue because somebody, probably a teacher or a test, indicated to them that they aren't learning. And the problem is, third grade is when they move from learning to read to reading to learn. And so you really want to, the earlier the better, but that's like a stop when parents can't ignore it. And so if you take a typical third grader, you tell a parent that your child's having trouble reading, they start looking into the tutoring options. They're expensive, right? To get good tutoring. In Boston, it's $150 an hour to get a Norton Gillingham tutor. So you
Wow.
can generally only afford maybe once a week. But kids who are that old, with maybe 1 or 2 grade levels behind in reading, they need almost everyday instruction. And that's where I go back to that data point. 2% in the country are getting that high dose, high quality tutoring. So this is a perfect application for AI, and why we're so excited about AI, because first of all, it's adaptive. The AI that we're building out is adaptive, right? So we're paying attention to the child's accuracy, their skills, their emotions as they're playing. Are they frustrated? What's their attention span? We know little Tommy has a 22-minute attention span. We're not going to give him more instruction than that. And every response is adaptive according to the inputs from that information. And then it's highly personalized, right? Because even better than a tutor can remember, AI can collect information from the mom and from the child's experience and the progress monitoring. So we know that he loves the Red Sox, he hates the Yankees, and he's got a 22-minute attention span. So everything will be customized and very engaging, and we make it very game-like as well. And all of this is providing as a platform evidence-based instruction. And we are also quite good at working with kids with attention issues, and there's a high co-occurrence between dyslexia and ADHD, so it's quite handy. Many of the kids we're working with, they've tried so many other things and it's not working. They lose patience or they lose interest. And so the fact that we're adept at knowing how to keep these kids engaged is pretty important too.
A lot of kids are either underdiagnosed or diagnosed late, delayed diagnosis for dyslexia, and that impacts learning, reading. Walk me through the problem and how big this is.
Completely. 70% of fourth graders are not reading on grade level in our country. Some of it is a function of not diagnosing reading challenges. Some of it is a curricular disservice that we've done to our kids. But the reality is, and the scientific co-founder of the company would say, that you can prevent dyslexia if you get to these kids early. So if you're getting to them when they're 4 and 5 years old, you're giving them good instruction. You rewire the brain with good instruction, and they won't move forward with these learning issues that we're seeing in the classroom. The problem is, going back to my comment earlier, parents don't typically see this. It's not brought forth as an issue by the schools or society in general until they're failing standardized tests, so often in third grade. And that's the real tragedy. We know how to find this early. We have the tools to find it early, but we're just not as informed as we want to be to solve that. That's part of our mission, is to move younger. Right now, we're going to help those third and fourth graders when they come to us, but our goal is to get this moving younger and younger so that parents don't see that degradation of self-esteem that I saw in my son.
I love the idea of prevention or early detection. I think the more we can do that, the better learners have in our schools. And I think it'll improve behavior, it'll improve attendance, it'll improve self-esteem, and so many things that are tied to reading and learning. How do they find you? How do families, third and fourth graders, find you?
It's often through referrals like that. Other moms, teachers, neuropsychologists doing assessments, speech and language pathologists often are the ones that identify issues with kids early on. And we're also doing Google ads and Meta. Parents are often scrolling in the middle of the night and asking, does my child have dyslexia with these symptoms? And we're there as well. So we're just reaching them through whatever means we can.
I imagine this is not something today that is reimbursable through that process, right?
Yeah, I can get on a bit of a soapbox. We have an interesting structure in the United States. If it's a medical issue, it's handled through the medical system. Hopefully and supposedly doctors learn about it in medical school and in their practice. If it's an educational issue, it's considered to be the purview of the schools. 70% of our fourth graders are not reading on grade level. The system has failed them. And You can talk to parents of kids with dyslexia who are in 3rd and 4th grade, and what you'll hear come out of their mouth is, I am alone in this. Because if they turn to their doctor that may or may not have studied this or know much about it, they typically will make a referral to a neuropsychologist. That's often a 9 to 12. I just heard about a 24-month wait to get your neuropsych done, and that's a terrible waste of that brain plasticity in an early child when you should be giving good instruction to rewire their brain, and it's thousands of dollars because it's not considered a medical issue, it's not reimbursed. So we've left families, and it's millions of families, out in the cold on this. That's part of what we're about, Sprout Labs, is to be that one-stop shop to make it easier on them.
Does dyslexia impact a young learner's ability to do math?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our vision, so we're starting with reading, but we're really here for all learning differences. So we have the roadmap. We're adding math, we're adding language, we're adding executive function, and we can go on from there, attention, etc. There's a high co-occurrence, high comorbidity between these various learning differences. Depending on the study you look at, 20%, 40% of kids with dyslexia also have ADHD. Kids with dyscalculia, which, by the way, is as prevalent as dyslexia, or DLD, which is developmental language disorder. They have a problem with language in general. Those are all as prevalent as dyslexia. Dyslexia is 1 in 5 in the population with symptoms. It's a very high prevalence. And a high hereditary, like highly hereditable. If you have it in your family, it's a 1-2 chance that your kids will have it.
That's interesting. So there's a sibling that has it. Perhaps it could be a good idea to think about their younger siblings to see if they may have similar learning differences.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we hear from families and the mom is saying, I missed it on my first. I feel really bad about that, and I'm not doing it on the next one.
Carla, thank you so much for joining us and telling us your story. I appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So my third guest today is Phil. I met Phil nearly a decade ago, and his story of turning tragedy into an opportunity is something I still reflect upon today. I would love for you to tell our audience how this all got started, how Nicolette got started.
The origin was me having extremely premature twins. Sometimes they're called extremely low birth weight twins. So I had 25 weekers, my wife and I. They were very sick. All babies born that early are sick. Mine were worse than average. They were both around a pound each in terms of their weight, under a foot long. Super sick lungs, so very wet lungs. And then some other issues too.
Was there anything leading up to the point where they were born where you were thinking this was a possibility, or was everything progressing to a place where you thought they were going to be born?
There were a couple of small things that, looking back, were indicators, but at the time, no. Either I was in denial about it because the thought of even spending a day in a NICU freaked me out before they were born. So my mindset was things are going great.
So you weren't even thinking about the NICU. You hadn't toured NICUs. You hadn't dug into the NICU experience.
I had toured NICUs because they're twins. That's a high-risk pregnancy. It's pretty standard to tour a NICU if you're having twins, and we did. But in retrospect, I do believe my brain would not process something like this ahead of time. I just wanted to view it as it's likely going to be a term birth. For twins, I think that's 37 weeks or so is about average. I remember also a doctor telling me they might need to spend a few days in the NICU. And even being in the NICU more than a day freaks me, the thought of it freaked me out. So either objectively speaking, things looked good, or also my own sort of fear and denial of it being a real possibility. One or both of those things had me thinking we would be on easy street. So when they were born, that was a surprise. We were all caught off guard. Up until that time, I can tell you the kind of person I was supremely confident. I remember believing I could solve any problem known to man. I had a job at Canon, not in healthcare at all, not even close, but a high-end VP, took a lot of risk type job, and I was good at it, and I just thought I could do anything. And then in this moment, they're born. It's like at midnight. I see them for the first time going from L&D through the hallway to the NICU, and it's just an insane sight. And I just instantly just become more scared than I ever remember being ever. Then, after a few hours, we're allowed to go into the NICU to see them. And a few hours after that, being presented with like choices that we needed to make around their health. And I was just completely clueless. So I went from a supremely confident individual to a completely helpless individual in a few hours just because of this event. And that really describes my life for the next few months. Like I was constantly behind the eight ball, unable to make decisions I really wanted to make. And then a few days after I'd made a decision, looking back and thinking, I wish I would have done something different. So that persisted. Ultimately, with my kids, we had a good outcome and a bad outcome. My daughter, Nico, her name is Nicolette. We call her Nico, named the company after her, but she died on day 27.
I'm so
And my
sorry.
son is doing great now. Plays basketball. You would never know he was that small, that sick. Makes music videos, raps. He's just like
He
killing
must
it.
be around 10 now.
He's 10, yeah.
Wow.
But even in his case, he was in the NICU 110 days. So I'm so happy about his outcome, but it could have been better, for sure. Could have stayed at the hospital less time, could have been much more developed on a shorter timeline and matched his peers, which he was well behind his peers for a while on the development front. We could have been better at all of those things as parents if we had had the right tools to do it. This is just very clear to me towards the end of the NICU stay. And so as I leave the NICU, we get home, I go back to my job. Fortunately for me, I had a job that allowed me to sort of work at the hospital a bunch. But now I'm getting back into the regular normal flow of things. And my brain just cannot focus on my previous day-to-day life at Canon doing those things I used to do. I'm thinking about my NICU experience and how I just didn't understand how there could be such magnificent medical devices in a NICU, such investment in medical devices and technology, and at the same time, an absence of tools for parents to navigate the journey, to make better decisions, to be better participants in their children's care, to have an impact on their baby's outcome. They should have one of the biggest impacts. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So eventually, I co-founded Nicolette with a neonatologist and a head of product from Microsoft. There's so much that goes into building a product in healthcare, especially one that accesses patient data, that I quit my job and eventually just did it full time. We made the leap. And so that's how we got started.
So thank you for sharing all that. Now you're selling this thing to hospitals. And first of all, let's talk about what the product looks like today. So if I'm a hospital, why am I interested in this? And as a patient, what value does it bring to me?
Today it's for NICU parents. It does three things. Number one, transforms raw data from the electronic health record into very easy to use updates and insights that are conversational for families. It's explained to them in the way they need to hear things to understand them and to understand them quickly. Speed is really important. So number two, we format big data sets in ways that are really fun to use and easy to use and allow parents to drink in lots of data quickly, again, so that they're up to speed without even having to be briefed by the NICU team. Next is curated education. So we use the baby's data to drive evidence-based, up-to-date education to families that's tailored specifically to their baby. And that is regardless of what their baby is there for. So one of the big challenges in the NICU is the diversity of cases. There's prematurity, but that's one issue. There are thousands of diagnoses in a level 4 NICU that you'll see in a given year. So there's such a long tail of stuff. Parents often struggle to get good information, especially if there's a highly acute situation going on. We transcend all that. We give them easy to understand education, even if it's a rare disease. And so this equips them to really quickly transform from like a freaked out bystander who's of no value, in fact, sometimes negative value to their baby's outcome. We transform them from that stage to a very competent team member. That's day one. So it's about rapid education and also the confidence to participate. That's another big thing is you're so scared as a parent, even if you know what to do, it's still scary to actually do it.
I understand why that's important to a parent, but why is that important to a hospital?
Because if the parent is not actually doing the care, then the baby can't go home. Parents need to be able to be caregivers for this baby. They need to be able to feed their baby, change their baby, whatever congenital issues the baby may have, be able to be care providers outside the hospital. They need to demonstrate that they have that competency. So you've got to be hands-on as a parent at some point. The earlier you do it and the better you are at it and the more confidence you have in yourself to do it, the sooner the baby's going to hit its milestones, like eating, for instance, the sooner you can go home with your baby and the less likely you are to need to come back and be readmitted or any of those things. And also, NICU babies, preemies or not, have still needs, care needs that are above and beyond their peers in the first years of life. Like they need development therapy, OT, PT, etc. If you've been participating, doing it right, and you believe in yourself as a parent, you're going to leverage those areas of care that your baby needs much more effectively than if you weren't, right? You'll miss out on things you should be taking advantage of. And at the same time, if something goes wrong or you're scared, you'll use services that you shouldn't because you don't know better. So the baby's health is worse and it costs more. So hospitals have a big stake in parents being participants.
So my last question is, for parents out there who may be motivated by what their experience is, perhaps a negative experience or a positive one in a healthcare environment, and they're like, I want to build something to fix this. What advice would you have for them?
First of all, to go for it, even though you likely will fail. There's just so many ways that you will fail. It's not shameful if you fail. It's going to be super hard. It's going to be hard personally and professionally. Like I can tell you, my family, my wife in particular, wasn't wild about it because it can add drama to your life. And you've already had enough of that because you just went through a medical experience.
Right.
So just accept it that it's hard and you're probably going to fail. And yet you should do it anyway. I think if you can enter it with that mindset, then you'll be much more likely to be resilient in the face of the challenges. If you go into it not understanding that it's going to be hard, you're going to probably bail out more quickly. So just go knowing. And if the likelihood of failure is too hard, then don't do it. That would be my first piece of advice. The second is to really look into the community where you are, look for people who specialize in what you do, and just really learn as much as you can at all costs. It's not apparent sometimes. It's not easy to find them. A lot of people who can help you are super busy, but you just got to make that happen. For me, I wasn't in healthcare. I didn't understand things like how to get data out of an EHR, what I consider to be very basic things. I had to learn all of this stuff. I was a total newbie, but that's just what it takes. If you go deep in an area and you've got insights that no one else has and you can make a big impact, that's what counts. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do something just because you don't understand 80% of what you're about to walk into. If you have that deep insight that's going to change healthcare, follow it. Just realize you're going to need a lot of help, so go get it and just learn as much as possible before you do something crazy like, quit your job.
I love the grounding advice. Hey, thanks again. It's great catching up and looking forward to all the great things that you and the folks at Nicolette will continue to do to improve NICU care for patients and for families. Thanks, Phil.
All right. Thank you for joining us for your dose of optimism. Make sure to check out our show notes to get more information about our guests and the work they're doing. Visit our podcast page on the KidsX website to join our podcast community and to learn more about pediatric innovation. Thank you to our sponsors and to our presenting partner, KidsX. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and remember, it takes a village to make sure our kids grow into healthy adults. So volunteer at your local library, help out at the community center, and thank your crossing guard. And if you're so inspired, donate to your local children's hospital. All right, see you next time.
The content, views, opinions, and information presented on this podcast do not reflect the views of Children's Hospital Los Angeles or of the sponsors of the podcast. CHLA does not endorse the views, opinions, and information presented on this podcast, and CHLA specifically disclaims any legal liability or responsibility for the podcast content.